Not a single cent of my money, you understand. Nothing? Edward screamed. His cruelty chilled me to the bone. We had just returned from my wife's funeral, and my son had already changed completely. His eyes shined with a greed I had never seen before, as if a demon had taken possession of his soul. The $200 million are mine now, Dad, he continued, waving the will in my face like a victory flag. Everything is mine, and you mean nothing here anymore. You are less than nothing. Only 12 hours. Only 12 hours had passed since we buried the love of my life at Willow Creek Cemetery, and my own son, my flesh and blood, was kicking me out of the family home we had built together over 40 years of marriage. This house, where every corner held a memory, every room contained a story of love and sacrifice. Edward, please, I whispered. I was still wearing my black funeral suit, my face streaked with tears that wouldn't stop. We just buried your mother. How can you be so cruel? Where is the son I raised? Where is the little boy who used to cry in my arms when he had nightmares? Cruel? He laughed with a contempt I had never heard in his voice. You know what's cruel, Dad? That you lived all these years like a parasite off Mom's money. But those days are over. This house is mine. The money is mine. The properties are mine. And you are nothing but a useless old man who never worked a single day in his life. The lawyer, Mr. Richard Foster, cleared his throat uncomfortably from the corner of the living room. He had been the one to read the will that morning in his downtown Chicago office, confirming that my wife, Eleanor, had left her entire fortune to our only son. But something in his dark eyes told me there was more to this than met the eye. A spark of knowledge, a shared secret he couldn't reveal yet. You have 24 hours to get out of my house, Edward declared, pacing the living room like a conqueror surveying newly won land. And don't you dare bother me again. You are not my responsibility. For 40 years you lived off Mom's money like a freeloader. But now you're going to learn what it means to really work. You're going to know what it's like to earn your bread with the sweat of your brow. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a deep indignation that was growing like a fire in my chest. This was the little boy I had carried in my arms when he had a fever, the one I had taught to ride a bike in Lincoln Park, the one I had comforted through every nightmare, every stumble in life, the same boy who used to tell me I was his hero, that when he grew up he wanted to be just like his dad. Did you at least read the entire will? Mr. Foster suddenly murmured in a low voice. Something in his tone made Edward stop cold in the middle of the room. His footsteps echoed in the tense silence that followed. What do you mean by that, counselor? My son challenged him. But for the first time since the reading of the will, I saw a flash of uncertainty in his eyes, a shadow of doubt clouding his triumph. Mr. Foster exchanged a meaningful look with me, and I knew exactly what he was referring to. I knew the secret that Eleanor had guarded so closely. An almost imperceptible smile touched my lips as I watched Edward's face begin to pale slightly. Nothing. Nothing important for now, the lawyer replied with professional calm. But his barely contained smile said otherwise. I suppose you'll find out in due time, son. Edward strode toward me, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the marble floor that Eleanor had personally chosen 20 years ago. I don't care what that damn paper says. The money is mine by right. This house is mine, and you are leaving right now. I don't want to see you under this roof for one more minute. He shoved me toward the front door with so much force I almost lost my balance and fell down the front step. Only Mr. Foster's hand, moving quickly to steady me, kept me from hitting the ground. You know what else, old man? I don't want to see you at any more funerals, any family gatherings, any social events. As far as I'm concerned, from this moment on, you're dead, just as dead as Mom. The sound of the heavy front door slamming shut echoed through the house like a gunshot, like the final closing of a chapter of my life. I stood on the driveway, under the light Chicago autumn rain that had begun to fall, staring at the facade of the house where I had been happy for 4 decades. The French windows that Eleanor and I had chosen together on a trip to Paris. The garden we had planted with our own hands, full of jasmine and roses she loved. The memories, now turning to cold ashes. I walked slowly toward my old car parked on the street, each step feeling like I was carrying heavy stones in my shoes. My black funeral suit was getting soaked by the rain, which was falling harder now, but I didn't care at all. The cold of the rain was nothing compared to the ice I felt in my shattered heart. It was as if my soul had frozen in that instant. Mr. Foster came running after me, covering himself with his jacket. "Mr. Robert, please, wait a moment," he shouted, approaching with his leather briefcase under his arm. "I need to speak with you urgently. It's of vital importance. You can't just leave like this." I looked into his eyes and saw something that calmed me amidst the chaos. Complicity, secret knowledge, the same expression I had seen so many times on Eleanor's face when she had a plan, when she was plotting one of her brilliant business strategies. "Is this about what I think it is?" I asked in a low voice, almost a whisper. As the rain fell on our faces, he nodded seriously. His gravity contrasted with the smile he had shown inside the house. "Your wife was infinitely smarter than Edward could ever imagine, and you need to know the whole truth before it's too late. There are things Eleanor prepared, things that will change everything." I got into the car with Mr. Foster, and as we slowly pulled away from the house, I saw Edward peering through the main living room window. His expression had completely changed. It was no longer the triumphant smirk of a conqueror. It was a worried, almost fearful expression, because he didn't know what he was about to discover, because he didn't know that his mother had been far more cunning than him. Mr. Foster drove me to his downtown office in a silence heavy with meaning. During the drive through the Chicago streets, my mind drifted between disbelief and a dull rage growing in my chest like an uncontrolled fire. 40 years. 40 years of marriage to Eleanor, of building not just an immense fortune together, but a family, a home, a legacy. And now my own son, my blood, had thrown me out like a beggar, like trash you throw on the street. "Sit down, Robert," Richard said with a firm voice as soon as we entered his elegant 12th-floor office. His brown eyes reflected a mixture of genuine pity and something else. Something that looked like hope. A hope I didn't dare to feel yet. I sank into the Italian leather chair in front of his mahogany desk. The same place where Eleanor and I had signed our wills years ago, when we were still young and the future seemed infinite. The office walls were lined with Mr. Foster's framed diplomas, degrees from prestigious universities, and family photos showing happy moments, painfully reminding me of everything I had just lost. "Robert, there's something critical Edward doesn't know," the lawyer began, carefully opening the leather briefcase. "Your wife, Eleanor, was an extraordinarily forward-thinking woman, a brilliant strategist, and she knew her son's character better than he knew himself." I pulled a white handkerchief from my pocket and dried the tears that kept streaming down my wrinkled cheeks. "Richard, please, I'm begging you. I've already lost my wife, the love of my life. Now I've just lost my son. Don't give me false hope. Don't play with the feelings of a broken old man. This isn't false hope, Robert. These are concrete, verifiable legal facts." He spread several official documents on the table. Documents with notary seals and signatures I recognized immediately. "Do you remember when Eleanor insisted we meet alone exactly 6 months ago, without Edward present?" I nodded slowly, remembering that afternoon. Eleanor had been very specific, almost mysterious about that meeting. She said she had private, delicate matters to discuss, things that only concerned us as a couple, as life partners. "On that specific day, your wife prepared a secret addendum to the official will, a very specific and detailed clause that would only be activated under certain, very particular circumstances." Mr. Foster pointed with his index finger to a small print paragraph on one of the legal documents. "If Edward showed extreme and unjustified cruelty toward you, especially during the sacred period of mourning, the entire inheritance would automatically revert to you as the sole legitimate heir." My heart stopped for a moment that seemed an eternity. "What? What are you saying, Richard? Are you telling me?" "I'm saying your wife knew with surgical precision what kind of person her son was deep down, and she made meticulous arrangements to protect you." Mr. Foster smiled openly for the first time all day, a smile that lit up his face. The full $200 million, the family home, all the properties here and abroad, all the investments in Swiss banks. Everything legally reverts to you, if we can prove conclusively that Edward met the exact conditions of the secret clause. The tears rolling down my face changed their taste in that instant. They were no longer bitter tears of deep sadness, but of a complex emotion I couldn't define. Immense relief, perhaps, or divine justice, or infinite gratitude toward my wife, who even from beyond the grave was still protecting me as she always had. And how do we prove that legally? I asked, my voice trembling as I gripped the desk. How do we demonstrate to a judge that Edward was cruel? Mr. Foster pulled his smartphone from his suit pocket and showed it to me with a triumphant expression. On the illuminated screen, an audio recording app was clearly active, with bars moving, indicating it had captured sound. I recorded the entire conversation this afternoon at the house. Every cruel word that came out of his mouth, every despicable insult, every horrifying moment when he mercilessly threw you out of the home where you had just mourned your wife. It's all digitally recorded. I put my trembling hands over my face and wept uncontrollably. But now I was crying with profound gratitude for Eleanor, my dear, wise Eleanor, who even from the cold grave continued to care for me, protect me, and love me as only she knew how. But there's much more, mister, Foster continued in a serious voice, pulling more documents from his seemingly bottomless briefcase. Your wife also left very specific and detailed instructions on how to proceed. You must let Edward believe he has absolute control for a prudent amount of time. You must let him make terrible mistakes that show his true, rotten character to the whole world. Only then, when he has shown who he really is, can we definitively activate the clause before the authorities. You mean I have to keep pretending I'm completely ruined? That I have to act like a beggar? Exactly, Robert. Your wife knew her son better than anyone. She knew with certainty that absolute power would corrupt him quickly, like poison, and that you would need time to decide clearly if you really wanted to take it all back, or if you preferred to give Edward one last chance at redemption, one last chance to change. I stood up painfully from the chair and walked to the large window overlooking the main avenue. Outside, the city of Chicago continued its normal, chaotic rhythm, completely oblivious to the Shakespearean drama unfolding in our lives. I thought of Eleanor, of how she had always been 3 steps ahead of everyone in the most complicated business deals. Apparently, she had also been 3 steps ahead in the game of protecting our shattered family. What do I have to do now? I asked without turning, watching the city lights begin to twinkle as evening fell. Go to a modest hotel downtown, something discreet. Act at all times as if you have truly lost everything. I will personally monitor every single one of Edward's actions. According to your wife's precise instructions, he will show his true rotten face very soon. It's only a matter of days. And what if he doesn't? What if his heart has really changed? What if this was just a temporary reaction to the unbearable pain of grief? Mr. Foster walked over to me and placed a fatherly hand on my trembling shoulder. Robert, with all due respect, you and I both know perfectly well that's not going to happen. Edward showed with absolute clarity today who he really is, deep in his soul. Your wife Eleanor knew it for years, and that's precisely why she prepared this entire master plan in such detail. I took the legal documents with trembling hands and carefully put them in the inner pocket of my damp jacket. How long do I have before this all expires? The secret clauses can be legally activated at any time during the next 6 calendar months. But your wife specifically suggested waiting at least 30 full days to observe the complete and definitive pattern of Edward's behavior. She wanted to be absolutely sure. We left the office after the sun had completely set over Chicago. Mr. Foster personally drove me to a modest hotel in the city center, a 2-star place I would have never even considered in my previous life, but which would now become my temporary home. My refuge during this strange test. One more very important thing, Robert, the doctor said before saying goodbye at the hotel entrance. Your wife left a personal letter for you, with explicit instructions to give it to you only after Edward showed his true character without any masks. He carefully pulled a sealed envelope with red wax from his briefcase. I firmly believe the precise moment for you to read it has arrived. I was left completely alone in that small, modest room with peeling walls, the envelope in my trembling hands. On the cream-colored paper, written in Eleanor's elegant, familiar handwriting, was my full name. For my dearest Robert, the strongest and most noble man I know. My hands shook violently as I carefully broke the red wax seal. Eleanor's handwriting was unmistakable. That elegant, fluid script I had admired for 40 happy years of marriage. I sat down slowly on the narrow bed, and under the dim, flickering light of the bedside lamp, I began to read the letter my wife had written for this exact moment. My dearest Robert, my eternal love, if you are reading these words, It means Edward has finally shown his true face, and my plan is unfolding exactly as I hoped. Forgive me deeply for not telling you everything while I was alive, but I desperately needed your reaction to be completely genuine, so he would believe in his temporary victory without any doubt. Tears began to roll abundantly down my face as I continued reading every word written with love. For so many attempts. In the last years of my life, I watched with growing pain how our son became greedier, crueler, more selfish. Remember when he mercilessly fired Mr. Henderson, our faithful gardener, just because he asked for a small raise after 20 years of loyal service? Or when he flat out refused to help your nephew David when he lost his job and his family was going hungry? I saw clearly how he treated the domestic staff, how he spoke with absolute contempt about people who have less money than us. I paused my reading and looked out the dirty hotel window at the Chicago skyline. Indeed, Eleanor had clearly seen what I had refused to accept for years out of blind fatherly love. Our son had become a person we didn't recognize. But there is something much more important you must know urgently, my love. The $200 million listed in the official will is not our entire fortune. There are additional secret accounts, properties registered solely in your name, investments that only you and I know about. The real total of our assets amounts to $450 million. My heart stopped completely. $450 million! Eleanor had been even more astute than I had imagined in my wildest dreams. The additional accounts are at the National Bank on Michigan Avenue, registered under your full name, Robert Martinez. The password is the date of our first kiss, May 15th, 1985. Mr. Foster has all the necessary documents, but he will only give them to you when you are completely ready to take full control. I kept reading, and every line revealed how deeply Eleanor had planned for this complex situation. Your task now is to observe. Let Edward firmly believe he has everything. You will see how absolute power corrupts absolutely. As the wise Lord Acton said, he will spend, he will waste, and he will show his true rotten character to the world. When the precise moment comes to reveal yourself as the true sole heir, he will have already learned the value of humility in the hardest way possible. But always remember, my eternal love, the goal was never to punish him cruelly, but to save him from himself. Our son has completely lost his way. But there is still time for him to find his true heart, the noble heart he had as a child. Only through painful loss can he learn to value what really matters. The letter continued with specific instructions. Eleanor, my Victoria? No, that was in the text. Must be a typo. Sticking to Eleanor. Eleanor had prepared everything down to the last microscopic detail, including trusted contacts who would help me during this difficult transition, and a step-by-step plan to recover not only my fortune, but also, she hoped, our lost son. I trust you completely to make the right decisions at the right time. You are the wisest and most compassionate man I know, and I know with certainty you will find a way to transform this horrible tragedy into an opportunity for growth for our shattered family. At the end of the letter there was an additional note that made me smile through the tears. P.S. At the bank, you will also find an additional surprise. Our old friend Mark has been quietly managing some tech investments that aren't even included in the main calculations. Let's just say our real assets might be even higher than you imagine. I love you eternally. Your Eleanor. I carefully folded the letter and put it in my jacket pocket with the legal documents. My mind began to process all the overwhelming information. Eleanor had not only protected me financially with brilliant intelligence, she had also created a unique opportunity to teach Edward a lesson that could save his corrupted soul. I picked up the hotel phone and dialed Mr. Foster's number. Robert, is everything all right? He asked immediately, concern in his voice. I read the whole letter. I said simply, controlling my emotion. Tomorrow morning, I want to go to the bank. I need to fully understand the situation before I decide on my next strategic steps. Of course, Robert. I'll pick you up at 9 in the morning. And, Robert, your wife was a truly extraordinary woman. What she did for you, for your family, is the deepest act of love I have seen in my 30 years as an attorney. That night, I barely slept, not from anxiety or sadness, but from a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time since Eleanor's devastating death, I seemed to have a clear purpose. It wasn't just about getting the money back. It was about getting my son back, about saving his soul before it was too late. The next day, Mr. Foster arrived promptly at the hotel in his black Mercedes. During the drive to the bank, he explained the additional details Eleanor had entrusted to him. "Your wife began to suspect the change in Edward about 2 years ago," he told me. "That's when she began to discreetly restructure a considerable part of her assets. She wanted to be absolutely sure that you would be protected, no matter what happened after her death." At the bank, the personal manager, an elegant woman named Patricia Delgado, received us with the formality appropriate for accounts of that magnitude. "Mr. Robert, I am deeply sorry for your loss," she said, guiding us to a private office. "Your wife was a highly respected client here. And let me say, the arrangements she made to protect you are extraordinarily intelligent." For the next 2 intense hours, Patricia meticulously explained the true scope of the wealth Eleanor had built. The secret additional investments, the international properties in the Bahamas and Miami, the investment funds that had grown silently for years. The current total of the fortune, considering market fluctuations, amounts to $462 million, she finally informed me. I leaned back in the leather chair, completely overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Eleanor had achieved, and more importantly, by the complexity of the plan she had designed. "And what about the accounts Edward knows about?" I asked. "Those accounts do exist, and they contain the $200 million mentioned in the official will, but they are subject to the clauses Mr. Foster already explained. If those clauses are legally activated, those funds will also automatically return to you." We left the bank with a completely new perspective. I was not a helpless widower who had just lost everything. I was a man with more than enough resources to change the course of this story. But first, I needed to see how far Edward was willing to go in his new role as a millionaire heir, because he didn't know that his every move was being watched. Over the next 2 revealing weeks, I became a silent observer of my son's transformation, from my modest hotel room, and with Mr. Foster's discreet help, I watched Edward begin to show his true, unmasked face to the world. The first sign came just 3 days after he kicked me out. Mr. Foster called me with a report that chilled my blood. "Robert, he fired the entire service staff," he said in a grave voice. "Sarah, who had worked in the kitchen for 15 loyal years. Mary, the housekeeper who practically watched him grow up. He gave them all a miserable severance payment and threw them out, with no explanation other than he didn't need them anymore. Sarah had called Mr. Foster, crying inconsolably, asking what she had done. This woman had prepared thousands of meals for our family with love. She had taken care of Edward when he was a child, like a second mother to him. And what reason did he give them? I asked, though I already feared the answer. According to Sarah, Edward told her that people like her no longer had a place in his new life of luxury, that he was going to hire more sophisticated staff, more in line with his new elevated economic position. He spoke to them with a contempt he had never shown before. I closed my eyes and felt a stab of deep pain in my chest. Eleanor had been absolutely right. The money was revealing our son's true nature. But that was only the beginning. A week later, Mr. Foster showed me photographs a private investigator had taken. In the images, I could see Edward coming out of luxury stores on the Magnificent Mile, carrying bags worth more than our former employees' annual salaries. He spent $150,000 in a single day, Mr. Foster informed me as we reviewed the receipts. Designer clothes, expensive Swiss watches, handmade shoes, things he absolutely doesn't need. But what hurt my soul the most was the photograph of him laughing loudly with his new friends. Those superficial people who had only flocked to him after learning of his inheritance. He was wearing an Italian suit that cost more than Sarah's old car, drinking $1,000 champagne. "There's more," Mr. Foster continued, his expression turning even more serious. "Yesterday, he went to the country club. He canceled your membership and asked that your name be removed from all historical records." "What?" I whispered, feeling as if I'd been punched in the stomach. "He told the club manager that you were no longer relevant, and that he didn't want his name associated with yours. He wants to erase any trace of your existence." I sat on the hotel bed and cried, not for the club membership, but for the calculated cruelty of his actions. Edward wasn't just enjoying his new wealth. He was deliberately, and in the most hurtful way possible, erasing my existence from his life. That afternoon, I received a call I never expected. It was Mr. Henderson, the former gardener, the man Edward had fired years ago for asking for a raise. "Mr. Robert, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to tell you something that happened." Mr. Henderson explained that he had gone to the house to offer his condolences for Eleanor's death. But Edward had greeted him with chilling coldness. He told me that people like me have no right to be in that house. He yelled at me to leave and never come back. That poor people couldn't contaminate his new millionaire life, he recounted, his voice choked. "Mr. Robert, your family was like my own for 20 years. I cared for those gardens, and he treated me like street trash." After hanging up, I sat in silence for hours. Mercedes had predicted this. She had seen an inherent cruelty in Edward that I had refused to recognize. The next day, Mr. Foster brought even more disturbing news. "Edward is planning to sell important properties," he said, spreading documents on the hotel cafe table. "The beach house in Miami, the downtown apartment Eleanor bought for him. He's even considering selling the office building where Eleanor built her empire." Why would he sell all that? According to the real estate agent, he wants immediate liquidity for more exciting investments. Apparently, some new friends convinced him to invest in businesses that promise quick and easy profits. Over the following days, I watched from the shadows as Edward methodically destroyed everything Eleanor and I had built. The final straw came exactly 3 weeks after my expulsion. Mr. Foster called me at 6 in the morning, an emergency. "Robert, you need to come to my office immediately. Edward has done something that changes everything." An hour later, I was sitting at Mr. Foster's desk, watching a video on his computer that left me breathless. It was security footage from the country club, from the annual charity gala Eleanor and I had organized for 10 years. The gala was continuing this year in Eleanor's memory. Edward was expected to make a symbolic donation. Instead, we watched him arrive with an unbearable arrogance and interrupt the event to announce that he was canceling all the donations our family had promised. "My mother is dead," we heard him say to the horrified audience, "and with her died her stupid charities. This money has better uses than wasting it on people who don't know how to value it." The faces of shock and disgust in the video were evident. These were people who had known and respected Eleanor for decades. "But there's something worse," said Mr. Foster, switching to another video. "This happened afterward in the parking lot. In this recording, we saw Edward being confronted by Robert Sanchez, an old friend of Eleanor's who ran one of the foundations. "Edward, your mother would be ashamed," Mr. Sanchez said sadly. "Those donations help hundreds of families." Edward's response shattered my soul. "My mother was a naive idealist. I'm smarter than her. Money was made to be enjoyed, not given away to losers who don't know how to work." Mr. Foster stopped the video and looked me directly in the eyes. "Robert, I think it's time to activate the clauses of the will. Edward has crossed every possible line. Edward had crossed every possible line, but I had other plans. Eleanor had given me not only the legal tools, but also the deep wisdom to understand this wasn't just about money. It was about saving my son's soul." "Not yet, Richard," I said, with a determination I hadn't felt in weeks. "First, I'm going to let him face the consequences of his own actions. I need to see if this change is genuine or just temporary desperation." I didn't have to wait long. The consequences arrived exactly 1 month after he kicked me out, and they came in the form of his new friends. Mr. Foster called me one morning. "Robert, Edward's new investment partners have disappeared," he said gravely. "They took $50 million. I sat down slowly. $50 million. A large chunk of the inheritance Edward thought he controlled. How did it happen? According to the private investigator, Edward met these businessmen at an exclusive party on the Gold Coast 3 weeks ago. They promised to double his investment in 6 months through a European art import business. It was all an elaborate scam. Mr. Foster sent me the details. The fake names, the fraudulent bank accounts. It was a sophisticated operation targeting rich, inexperienced heirs just like Edward. The worst part is, he signed all the documents without consulting me, Mr. Foster continued. Apparently, he told them he didn't need lawyers anymore because he trusted his business instinct. What bitter irony. That afternoon, I received a call I never thought would come. It was Edward. His voice sounded completely different. Smaller, scared. "Dad?" he whispered. For a moment he sounded like the little boy I used to console. "Hello, Edward," I replied calmly. "How are you, son?" "I need to talk to you. Urgently. Could we meet?" His voice was trembling. "Where would you like to meet?" I asked, noting he avoided mentioning the house. "Our house. Could you? Could you please come home? I need you to come. I'm begging you." 30 minutes later, I was standing in front of the family home. Edward opened the door immediately. He looked terrible. His perfectly combed hair was disheveled and greasy. His expensive Italian shirt was wrinkled, and he was wearing yesterday's clothes. "Come in, please," he said, avoiding my gaze in shame. The house was unrecognizable. The furniture Eleanor and I had chosen with love was gone, replaced by cold, soulless modern pieces. The family photographs had vanished, replaced by expensive abstract art. "What happened, Edward?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He collapsed onto the new leather sofa and began to cry uncontrollably. "I was scammed, Dad. I lost $50 million. Those men I trusted, they disappeared with all my money." I sat down next to him, fighting the paternal urge to comfort him. This was the moment Eleanor had foreseen. "And what do you plan to do now?" I asked gently. "I don't know," he sobbed. "The lawyers I consulted say it's impossible to get the money back, and Mr. Foster refused to help me when I asked him to handle the case." Of course Mr. Foster had refused. This was part of Eleanor's plan. "Edward, why did you call me?" I asked directly. He lifted his red-rimmed eyes to mine. For the first time in months, I saw something resembling genuine humility. "Because I realized I have no one else in the world. All those friends I thought I had, they disappeared as soon as they heard the money was lost. And I treated all the people who really loved me terribly, including you." The tears flowed harder now. "Especially you, Dad. What I did, it was unforgivable. I threw you out of the house right after Mom's funeral. I was cruel. I was horrible to you for no reason." It was the first time I had heard him take responsibility for his actions in years, but we weren't at the bottom yet. "And what do you expect me to do now?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "I know I don't deserve your help, but maybe you could stay? You could help me figure out how to get out of this mess I created." I agreed to stay that night. Not in my old bedroom. Edward had transformed that sacred space into his own, removing every last trace of Eleanor. I slept in the guest room, a constant reminder of my new status in this house. Over the next few days, I watched Edward struggle. The remaining money was still a fortune, but the loss had terrified him. "Dad, do you think Mom would be disappointed in me?" he asked one night. The question broke my heart. "Your mother loved you deeply, Edward, but she also valued honesty, compassion, and responsibility above all else. What do you think?" He looked down at his plate. "I think she would be very disappointed, not just because of the money, but because of how I treated people. You, Sarah, Mr. Henderson. I acted like a monster. And what do you plan to do about it?" This was the crucial question. "I don't know if I can do anything. Some things can't be undone, right? Some wounds are too deep." He was finally beginning to understand. But the most important test was yet to come. 3 days later, the second crisis hit. Mr. Foster called me early. "Robert, the bank is requesting audits of all the inheritance accounts. Apparently, someone reported suspicious movements after the scam. This is part of the plan." "What does that mean?" "It means they are going to temporarily freeze all the assets while they investigate. Edward will be effectively cut off from his money for at least 2 months." I hung up and went upstairs to tell Edward. His reaction would tell me everything. He was silent for a long time. Then, to my genuine surprise, his first words weren't panic. "I guess this is what I deserve," he said quietly. "After everything I did, after how I treated everyone. Maybe it's time I learned to live like a normal person." This response gave me hope. With the bank accounts frozen, Edward was forced to face a reality he had never known: real financial limitation. When the bills started piling up, the reality hit him. "Dad, I don't understand these numbers," he said one morning, a stack of bills in front of him. "The monthly expenses for the house are higher than any normal salary." It was the first time in his life he had ever seen the real bills. "How much do you think it costs to maintain this house monthly?" I asked. "I don't know. $5,000, maybe?" $22,000, I told him. showing him the bills for utilities, maintenance, insurance, and the new cleaning staff he had hired. His face turned white. 22,000 a month, just to keep the lights on. He was running out of money. Fast. "What am I going to do?" he whispered, real fear in his eyes. "Well," I replied calmly, "you could start by looking for a job." He laughed bitterly. "A job? Dad, I don't know how to do anything. I've never worked a day in my life." "Who's going to hire me?" It was a painful, valid question. Edward was 35 years old, with a college degree he'd never used and zero work experience. His first attempts were pathetic. He applied for managerial positions, believing his last name would be enough. "They told me I need experience," he recounted after his fifth failed interview. "How am I supposed to get experience if no one gives me a chance?" "Maybe you should start with something more basic," I suggested. His pride resisted, but when the electric company threatened to cut the power, his perspective changed. Finally, he got a part-time job at an electronics store. The salary was $1,200 a month, an amount he used to spend in a single afternoon. "It's humiliating, Dad," he said after his first exhausting day. "The manager is 10 years younger than me and treats me like I'm stupid. And the customers, some of them are so rude. And how do you feel about working?" "Exhausted," he admitted. "My feet hurt, my back hurts, and I don't understand how people do this every single day." But something interesting began to happen. "There's a guy there, Mark," he told me one night. "He works the morning shift. He has 2 kids and supports his elderly father on 2 jobs. He never complains. He's always helping customers with a smile. I don't understand how he does it." "Did you talk to him?" "Yeah. He told me he's been working there for 8 years. He started when his wife got sick and he needed the health insurance. He takes every extra hour he can." Edward paused. "Dad, I complained about losing $50 million. He's probably never seen $10,000 in his life, and he's so much stronger than I am." It was the first time I heard Edward express genuine admiration for someone without money or status. Eleanor would have been proud. The real turning point came a month later. "Dad, something terrible happened at work today," he said, clearly disturbed. "Mark got a call from the hospital. His father needs an emergency surgery that costs $8,000. The insurance won't cover all of it." "What happened?" "He just fell apart. In front of everyone. I've never seen someone so desperate. He told me he doesn't have that kind of money. He used all his savings on his late wife's medical bills. He doesn't know how to save his father." Edward was silent for a long time. I could see him struggling internally. "Dad," he finally said, determination in his voice, "I have a watch that's worth more than that surgery. I have suits in my closet that cost more than Mark's annual salary. And he has to choose between saving his father or feeding his kids. What do you plan to do about it?" This was the defining question. "I want to help him," he said, his voice firm. "I'm going to sell some of my things. That Rolex I bought last month for $15,000. I don't even need it. I can sell it and give Mark the money for his father's surgery." That night, while Edward slept, I called Mr. Foster. "How is the plan going?" he asked. "Better than Eleanor could have hoped," I replied, tears in my eyes. "I think he's really changing. I see the compassionate boy he used to be. It's time to reveal the truth." "Not yet. There's one more test he needs to pass." The next day, Edward sold the luxury watch and gave all the money to Mark. When I saw the profound gratitude in that man's eyes and the genuine satisfaction on my son's face, I knew we had reached a crucial point. But the universe had one last lesson. That same week, a letter arrived. It was from a different lawyer, representing the estate of a distant uncle of Eleanor's who had recently passed. "Mr. Edward," he read aloud, his hands trembling. "We regret to inform you that Mr. Thomas Peterson passed away last month and named you as his sole heir. His estate amounts to approximately $75 million. Edward dropped the letter on the table. He stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. $75 million. More, he whispered. After everything, after I finally learned the value of money, it just reappears. This was the final exam. What would Edward do with a new fortune after he had discovered compassion? The letter about Uncle Thomas's inheritance was real. But there was a crucial detail Edward didn't know. I had veto power over this inheritance, thanks to an agreement Eleanor had set up years ago. I decided not to reveal this. I wanted to see how he would react. "I can't believe it," he murmured. "Just when I thought I'd lost everything, when I was finally learning to live differently, this just falls from the sky." "How do you feel about it?" I asked carefully. "Confused," he admitted. 2 months ago, this would have been the answer to all my problems. I would have run to claim the money and gone right back to my old life. But now I'm not sure I want that empty life back. He sat on the sofa. "Dad, you know what I discovered working at that store?" "Tell me, son." "I discovered that I'm capable of things I never thought I could do. That I can work 8 hours straight. That I can solve real problems for real people. That I can genuinely help. And for the first time in my life, when someone says thank you, I know I actually earned it." My heart filled with hope. But I also know $75 million could help a lot of people, he continued thoughtfully. It could help Mark and his family, and Sarah, and Mary, and Mr. Henderson, all the people I hurt when I thought money made me superior. That night, Edward sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. "What are you doing?" "I'm making a detailed list," he replied. "A list of all the people I hurt, all the things I did wrong, and how I could use this money to repair the damage I caused." I watched him write names, specific amounts, detailed plans. Mark was on the list. So were Sarah, Mary, Mr. Henderson, the charities, and even the employees at the electronics store. "Dad, can I ask you something?" he said when he finished. "Of course, son." Do you think Mom would forgive me for everything I did?" His voice cracked. The question broke my heart. Eleanor had planned for this exact moment of genuine repentance. "Your mother loved you unconditionally, Edward. But more than forgiveness, she wanted you to find your way, to become the person she knew you could be. And do you think I'm finding it? Do you think I'm really changing?" Before I could answer, the phone rang. It was Mr. Foster. His voice was urgent. "Robert, I need to speak with you and Edward immediately. Something has come up regarding Uncle Thomas's inheritance." "What is it?" "I'd rather explain in person. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" I barely slept. I knew it was time. The next day, we arrived at Mr. Foster's office. Edward was wearing his uniform from the electronics store. He had to work right after the meeting. "Please sit down," Mr. Foster said, his expression serious. "Edward, there is something about your Uncle Thomas's inheritance you need to know." Edward leaned forward, nervous. "Your uncle was a wise man. He knew about the situation after your mother's death. He established a very specific condition for his inheritance." "What kind of condition?" Edward asked. "Mr." Foster opened a thick folder. "The inheritance can only be claimed if your father, Robert, certifies in writing that you have demonstrated a fundamental change in character, and that you are prepared to responsibly manage a fortune of this magnitude." The silence in the office was heavy. Edward turned slowly to look at me. I saw understanding, surprise, and something that looked like relief. Did you know about this?" he asked softly. "I found out last night when Mr. Foster called me." I lied gently. "And what do you think?" His voice trembled slightly. "Do you think I've changed enough? Do you think I deserve this responsibility?" This was the question. "Before I answer that," I said calmly, "I want to ask you a question. If I decided you weren't ready, if you lost this inheritance forever, how would you feel?" Edward thought for a long time. 2 months ago," he said, "I would have been desperate. I would have begged. I would have promised anything." He paused and looked me right in the eye. "But now, I think I'd be okay. I've learned that I can survive without millions of dollars. I've learned I can work. I can be useful, even without a family fortune. And if I say yes, what would you do with 75 million? Without hesitating, he picked up the notebook he had written last night. "First, I would repair all the damage I did. I'd compensate the people I hurt. I'd restore the donations I canceled. I'd make sure no one else suffered from my past selfishness." His voice grew stronger. "Then, I'd use the money to create real opportunities for others. Scholarships, job training programs, support for working parents like Mark. And for you? What would be left for you? Enough to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. I don't need to prove my worth through what I buy anymore." He smiled. a warmth I hadn't seen in years. Dad, these months taught me that real wealth isn't in your bank account. It's in the relationships you build, the difference you make. It's about being able to look in the mirror and respect the person you see. Mr. Foster and I exchanged a look. Edward had passed the final exam. But there was one more revelation. Edward, I said, taking a deep breath, there is something else you need to know. Something your mother planned from the moment she started to worry about your character. He looked at me, curious, but apprehensive. Mr. Foster, please show him the real documents. The lawyer opened another, much thicker folder. These, I began quietly, are the documents for your mother's real will, the one she prepared, knowing exactly how you would react. The real will? He whispered, his face turning pale. What do you mean? Your mother never left you the $200 million, Edward. Everything that happened, everything you experienced, was part of an elaborate plan to save you from yourself. I explained everything, the secret clause, the additional accounts that I controlled, the fact that I had never truly lost my position as the main heir. I knew what was happening the entire time, I continued, as his eyes filled with tears of understanding. I just wanted you to learn the lessons you needed. You mean... His voice failed. I mean, your mother loved you so much, she was willing to make you believe you had lost her love just so she could save you. And I was willing to let you kick me out, to let you treat me with cruelty, because I knew it was the only way for you to discover who you really wanted to be. Edward collapsed. This wasn't the crying of someone who lost money. It was the deep, agonizing sob of someone who finally understood the magnitude of the love he had received. Mom knew I would become a monster, he sobbed, and still, she found a way to save me. And you. He looked at me, his face wet with tears. You endured all my cruelty, knowing you could stop me at any moment. Your mother wrote in her letter that the goal was never to punish you. It was to save you, and I was willing to endure anything if it meant getting my son back. Mr. Foster handed us a box of tissues. So, the $50 million I lost to the scammers. Was that real money? Edward asked. Real money, Mr. Foster replied. That part wasn't planned. Your mother had put that amount in accounts you could actually use, expecting you to make financial mistakes. The scammers just accelerated the process. And Uncle Thomas's inheritance? It's real, I said. But, as you now know, it's conditional on my approval. Your Uncle Thomas was part of your mother's plan from the beginning. Edward was silent, processing everything. Finally, he looked up at me. Dad, can you forgive me? He whispered. Not just for these horrible months, but for years of being selfish and cruel and blind to what you and Mom did for me. I already forgave you, Edward. I forgave you from the very first day, because I knew the son I raised was still in there, somewhere under all that greed. So what now? He asked. What happens with all the money? The real inheritance? I pulled out a document I had prepared the night before. I've decided to divide everything equally between us, I said, but with specific conditions. Your share will be in a trust, managed jointly by both of us. Every major financial decision we will make together. And a significant portion must be allocated to charitable causes and to repairing the damage you caused. If you don't accept these conditions, you'll receive a fixed amount to live comfortably, but you will not have access to the main fortune. The decision is yours. Edward didn't hesitate. I accept. I accept all conditions. He stood up and walked to the window. Dad, I learned something these past few months. Money only has real value if you know how to use it to do good. Without that wisdom, it's just paper that corrupts your soul. And what about your job at the electronics store? I'm going to keep working there, he replied with determination. At least for a while. Mark and the other guys. They've become my real friends. And I like the feeling of earning my paycheck, no matter how small. Mr. Foster began preparing the official documents. But there was one more conversation we needed to have. Edward, I need to ask you something. And I want you to be completely honest. Of course, are you doing all this change of heart, because you've really changed? Or because you now know that I control the money? It was the most important question. Edward thought carefully. 2 hours ago, when I thought I depended on your approval for Uncle Thomas's inheritance. I had already decided that even if you said no, I would continue trying to be a better person. Not for the money, but because I finally like the person I'm starting to become. He came over and put his hand on my shoulder. Dad, these months of working, of struggling, of meeting real people with real problems, they taught me something 35 years of privilege never could. True wealth comes from the relationships you build and the good you do in the world. The money is just a tool to achieve that. And you're sure you won't go back to being the person you were? I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, he admitted honestly. But I can promise I will never forget the lessons I learned. And if I ever start to stray, I expect you to stop me again. That afternoon we signed all the documents. Edward officially became the co-owner of a fortune that now amounted to over $500 million, including Thomas's inheritance and the investments that had grown. But more important than any amount of money was what we had regained, our relationship as father and son, and the opportunity to use our wealth to make a real difference. When we left Mr. Foster's office, Edward surprised me. Dad, could we go visit Mr. Henderson? I want to apologize to him personally, and offer him not just his job back, but the chance to expand the gardens. Maybe start a landscaping business with our financial backing. As we walked to the car, I reflected on the miracle I had witnessed. Eleanor had been right. Sometimes, to save someone you love, you have to be willing to let them hit rock bottom. But there was one final surprise. Something even Eleanor hadn't foreseen. 3 months after our reconciliation, while we were organizing the first meeting of the foundation we had established in Eleanor's memory, a letter arrived. It was from a notary in Sao Paulo, Brazil, informing us of a safe deposit box Eleanor had kept secret. The box could only be opened after specific conditions were met. Edward had to have worked for his own money for at least 3 months. He had to have genuinely helped someone in need, and father and son had to have signed official documents of reconciliation. Mom really did think of everything, Edward murmured. We flew to Sao Paulo that week. At the bank, we were led to a vault. When we opened the box, we found something neither of us expected. In addition to more financial documents, there was a collection of letters, all written by Eleanor, dated and numbered, addressed to specific moments in our healing process. The first letter was marked for when Edward had learned the value of work. My dear son, Edward read aloud, tears rolling down his face. If you are reading this, it means you have discovered something I always knew was inside you. The capacity to be strong, independent, and compassionate. Work is not a punishment. It is a gift that connects you to your own dignity. The second letter was addressed to me. For Robert, the strongest man I know, I read, my voice trembling, my eternal love. Thank you for being strong when I could not be. Thank you for loving our son enough to let him make painful mistakes. But the last letter was the one that hit us the hardest, marked for when father and son were truly family again. My two loves, it began. If you are reading this together, it means the miracle I hoped for truly happened. Edward, you discovered that true wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you give. Robert, you proved once again that true love sometimes requires the greatest courage, to let go in order to regain. But there is something else you need to know, something I kept secret even from Mr. Foster. For the last 5 years, I have been silently donating millions of dollars to charities around the world, not through our family foundation. I wanted it to be completely anonymous. Edward and I looked at each other in astonishment as I kept reading. I have secretly paid for the college education of over 500 low-income students. I have funded 3 hospitals in rural areas. I have established funds for single parents, child nutrition programs, and shelters for victims of domestic violence. Eleanor had donated nearly $100 million, but she had structured the donations to continue automatically if we proved we were ready to continue her legacy. The real total of our family's assets is $650 million, the letter revealed. But it comes with the greatest responsibility you can imagine, to use this wealth to change lives, not just to live comfortably. At the end, instructions, contacts for organizations, a detailed plan to expand these efforts. P.S. In this box, you will also find the deed to a house in each of the places we helped. They are not for you to use as vacation homes. They are centers of operation. so you can personally oversee the impact of your donations. I want you to meet the families you help." We sat in silence, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Eleanor had been doing in secret. "Dad," Edward finally said, "do you realize what this means?" "It means your mother wasn't just teaching us about money," I replied. "She was preparing us to become stewards of a legacy that goes far beyond our family." In the following weeks, we began contacting the organizations Eleanor had been supporting, directors of children's homes who didn't know how to thank the anonymous angel who had saved them, students who had graduated from college, never knowing who paid their tuition. "It's overwhelming," Edward confessed one night. "Mom helped thousands of people without ever expecting recognition. How can we live up to that example?" "We don't have to live up to it immediately," I replied. "We just have to start, one step at a time." We decided to visit the centers she had established. Our first trip was to a hospital in rural Appalachia that she had fully funded. Seeing doctors save lives with equipment our money had provided, it changed our perspective fundamentally. "This is what Mom wanted us to understand," Edward told me, as he helped a young father fill out forms for his son's treatment. "Money isn't a prize we won. It's a tool we were entrusted with, to do good in the world." A year after our reconciliation, we officially established the Eleanor Martinez Foundation, with Edward as CEO and me as chairman of the board. Edward had left his job at the electronics store, but he kept his friendships with Mark and the other men. In fact, several of them now worked for our foundation, using their real-life experiences to help families in need. "You know the strangest part?" Edward asked me during the opening of our 10th program. "What's that?" "I'm happier now, working 14-hour days to help others, than I ever was when I could buy anything I wanted." Mom was right. True happiness comes from knowing your life has a purpose greater than yourself. That night, as we reviewed applications for our new loan program for working parents, I reflected on the extraordinary journey we had lived. Eleanor had orchestrated not only the salvation of her son's soul, but the complete transformation of our family. "Dad," Edward said, as we approved 50 new loans, "do you think Mom would be proud of us?" I looked at my son. He had gone from a selfish, cruel heir to a man dedicated to changing the world. I thought of Eleanor, of her impossibly complex plan, her faith that love could triumph over greed. "I think your mother knew exactly who we would become," I replied, "and I think right now, wherever she is, she's smiling, because her plan didn't just work. It exceeded even her most optimistic expectations." Edward smiled and continued working. Outside, the city slept, unaware that in that modest office 2 men were working late into the night, planning how to use a fortune to change the world. I didn't save him with money. I saved him by teaching him to save himself. And in the process, we discovered that the real wealth was never our financial fortune, but the infinite capacity of the human heart to transform pain into compassion, selfishness into generosity, and loss into purpose. And Eleanor, my dear Eleanor, had known this all along. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Eleanor Martinez Foundation had grown into one of the most respected charitable organizations in the country. Edward had married a teacher he met at one of our educational programs. Together, they were raising 2 children with the values of compassion and service Eleanor always wanted to instill. I had found peace in my role as a grandfather and mentor, knowing Eleanor's legacy would continue. The family home, once the scene of such cruelty, had been converted into a community center where families in need received support and guidance. Sarah and Mary had returned, not as employees, but as program coordinators. Mr. Henderson trained low-income youth, and Mark, the man who had unknowingly been the catalyst for Edward's change, was now the deputy director of our foundation. His recovered father volunteered in our programs for the elderly. One afternoon, while Edward and I were visiting the cemetery where Eleanor rested, my son placed fresh flowers on her grave and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for loving me enough to save me from myself." As the sun set over the city, I knew Eleanor was at peace. Her plan had worked perfectly. She had not only saved her son, she had created a legacy of love and service that would continue to transform lives long after we were all gone. If you enjoyed this story, you can support me by pressing the like button. This way, I can write many other stories like this. Thank you so in advance. And you, what would you do in this person's place? I really want to know your opinion, so write it here in the comments. I'm always curious to know what you think. Oh, and also tell me where you're watching this story from. If you want to hear more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to the Williams Revenge Stories channel. There are many others waiting for you. A big hug, and until next time.